Let's have our next presentation by Mr. Praveen Kombial, who is the Global Product Head for Business Application with EdgeVerve. To give you a background, his mandate is to leverage artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies to build and launch products solving for specific business problem for industries globally. At Edgeworth, Praveen leads a highly talented team of engineers and product managers in building an ecosystem for products addressing industries and functions such as financial services, insurance, consumer packaged goods, and supply chain. All to you, Praveen sir, to start off with your presentation, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ajit. And can you just confirm that you can hear me well enough?
Yes, sir. We can hear you loud and clear, sir.
All right. And hopefully see me as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So thanks, UBS, for setting up this forum. There's about 250 plus participants, so absolutely fantastic. And we're delighted at Edgeworth to be able to support this and bring this ecosystem together. So thank you, everyone. A very quick introduction about Edgeworth. As you can see, we are an Infosys company, and we are a subsidiary that was set up about 6 years ago with the sole intent of being a products company. We bring a lot of digital and emerging technology SaaS products to the market globally. Gaurav, thanks for the initial speak and some of the points that you highlighted about the complexities that have emerged. And I think what I would speak to is really where those digital technologies are helping drive this kind of an end-to-end connected supply chain. And that'll be the focus of my presentation. So let me just bring up my slide. Oops, sorry. Okay, there seems to be some lag.
We can see your presentation now, sir.
Okay, great. All right, great. Okay, so let's talk about building multi-enterprise value networks to really amplify what the industry is doing in demand planning and forecasting. And look, if you just take a step back, I mean, these are just literally keywords, right? The demand planner is the sutradhar, if I may call that. And really, some of the things that are top of mind are about forecasting, really driving the entire planning cycle. And you probably have the best vision of trying to bring the whole end-to-end ecosystem together. But you also have concerns about visibility of the data, granularity of the data, maturity. And you're moving towards predictive modeling, an omni-channel kind of view. And to our mind, the entire planning cycles are getting shortened. And if anything, the pandemic, the Black Swan event, as Gaurav called it, has really brought the entire planning ecosystem and the role even more center stage. You are expected now to focus more on closed loop planning and not just stop at a plan, but you also have to keep an eye out on the execution, right? So if anything, your world has become more complex. And this is the typical forecasting cadence, right? And all of you live and breathe this. Everything, the long-range planning from multi-year forecast, very strategic views, to more the single-year rolling forecast, months, weeks, depending upon what's the granularity of your business. And that's very heavy on monthly planning, call it tactical, relatively speaking, of course. And then the more operational view, which is the rolling forecast on a week. In some perishable commodities, you might be even looking at daily forecasts and so on and so forth. And it's a lot of it is about the block and tackle. They're really reacting to events, the operational cadence. And unfortunately, some of us spend a lot of time here, right? Because of where we are in the maturity of how we manage our supply chains. So if this is the kind of view, actually the world's just become even more complex potentially, right? look at your worlds today. Your manufacturings are outsourced much more globally. You've added far more suppliers and channels on the demand side. And while all this is helping you drive better capabilities from a business perspective, it has added up more volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, those classic VUCA terms, to your world. You are expected to drive demand much closer to the end state of the consumption because your channels have changed. Your inventory planning and fulfillment drivers have become more closer to those end states. So you're doing more maybe DC planning, maybe more demand-driven market planning, maybe even more micro-district planning. On the supply side, your geography has just got broadened, many times international. And now you're thinking about how to de-risk those international footprints as well, right? And aggregate forecasting doesn't really work. Look at the data sources, the interoperability of the data sources and the types of data that are coming in really mind-boggling. And you really have to do all this planning in the ecosystem of being a very live enterprise, right? I mean, many enterprises coming together. So we kind of see this as you have enhanced your business opportunities, but there have been trade-offs in lead time, the cost of inventory, safety stocks that were talked about, the cost to serve, and just your agility. So much more is expected from the whole planning ecosystem. So when you now see that cadence, and if you see some of the levers of what has changed, the multi-year forecast, the long-range planning has become even more strategic, right? Macroeconomic growth, geo factors, socio factors, globalization, etc. And of course, the sensing of the demand, right? The consumer behavior has become more important. So you're working much more closely at a strategic level. When you look at the rolling forecast, it hardly can be seen as tactical. It's more about looking at many more data sources, syndicated feeds, category understanding analysis, sitting with your marketing folks and so on and so forth, and seeing what they're going to be driving as promotions, etc., which could change this behavior. And of course, the operational, you are looking at many new sources of data. And I'm going to talk through some examples. We're working with some of our clients globally in something called as micro market districting. And it's a very interesting one. It's basically looking at how demand can be sensed in what they are, doing from an online purchase at a district level to sense that demand at a very granular level, and then try and map your inventory replenishment strategies and your stock strategies to try and meet that demand. And when we were doing this for a global brand, we realized that they were, the overstocking, understocking patterns were very stunning, because some districts in the US where they were running these promotions were actually understocked up to about 16% as against where they were wanting to see, right? So really the model of the story was operational planning, operational forecasting has become much more data driven and trying to get closer to the demand streams. There's a CPG major that we are working with in India who's trying to bring in the demand forecasting at a very granular level, but then try and bring in route planning and truckload optimization into the same ecosystem, into the same scheme of things. And that's driving a whole different perspective, right? So you are becoming more data backed at an operational level. Sorry, can I just request everyone to go on mute, please? I'm going to keep talking along, but...
Sir, let me make everyone mute, then you unmute yourself and then represent. Hold on, sir, just a second.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, sir. Now unmute yourself and speak. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Ajay. And look, we'll possibly take questions as we go along again to keep it to time. So really, to our minds, the call to action in this whole environment is for your ecosystem and your entire operational kind of supply chain ecosystem to be more connected. So what is kind of EdgeVerve doing and TradeEdge doing in this space? And so we've got this product ecosystem called TradeEdge, which is bringing a lot of bringing a lot of demand networks and supply networks all together, right? But this is not about a product pitch. What we're seeing is that organizations are moving towards creating a one common ecosystem platform of the entire supply chain. We are working hard to bring in demand side networks, whether they are your distributors, retailers, and many other online ecosystems on the one hand to get much better capability and much better visibility of your demand, sense demand, and sometimes react to shaping demand, but also to bring in your suppliers, carriers, 3PLs onto the same ecosystem. And there are also financiers who are looking to see how they can support the entire financial ecosystem, financial needs of your suppliers. The network, the base platform, has the capabilities of bringing a lot of data in and having the ability to connect and orchestrate with very varied degrees of technology maturity of your partners. There are some who would have ERPs. There are some who have auto management systems that are well established. They can connect via APIs, etc. But there are many, many others in our ecosystem who have very nascent capabilities of how they can share the data. Simple sharing protocol, SFTPs. There are some partners actually on the demand network. We're connected to almost about 600,000 partners of some sort or the other. And many of them share just simple Excel sheets, data sheets on a consistent basis to help us bring that whole supply chain data together. So the ability to capture, integrate, cleanse, and have some real data which is aligned to your masters is the first part of bringing those base capabilities into play. And then you can do so much more with that data, right? And we are driving a lot of use cases of visibility, traceability, order fulfillment, orchestration, and so on and so forth, by doing it on this one common ecosystem of the network. And our design tenets to drive that have been about data at the heart, a lot of embedded intelligence. We're not talking about using AI for the sake of AI, but what can you do with it? What can you deliver from those insights? How can you create alerting mechanisms on what could be supply chain challenges? Or how can you create orchestration challenges that can be automated or need very little human intelligence to oversee it? We do this at scale, so that globally you are on scalable cloud platforms so that you can, really build as you build your networks. And of course, we have the technology to create a very unique experience layer, depending upon who your partner is on the network, whether it's your supplier, your distributor, your retailer, and for them to see what is contextual and what is necessary for them to see on the entire universe, right? So now, how does all this help in your demand forecasting? And that's the real key question. To our mind, the ecosystem, the network, as we call it, is helping drive and create very low data, very low latency and high granularity of the data. And as all of you know from a forecasting perspective, that is gold mines, right? That is where a lot of visibility is coming by. In fact, we work with one of our global majors, a CPG major, and they're talking about saying that, look, if I have daily sell-through visibility from my retailers or secondary sales from my distributors of what I sold yesterday available today, then what is the need for forecasting at a weekly level at all? I'm going to be driving a replenishment strategy, which then essentially kind of replaces the very medium short-term forecast that you're doing. On the other side, the ability to see much more granular demand sensing data is changing the paradigm with how I will use artificial intelligence to drive much better forecast. You have to move beyond just statistical methods to really do multi-attribute forecasting, because now you're using not just what you sold previously, which is really a view that you have at a granular level now, but also using much more data, external data. And that's the kind of micro marketing districting use case that I was talking about, which is using demand sensing patterns of a very different order, right? So if you have all of this granular data and you have it at a data standard which is acceptable and interoperable, so to say, you can do so much more, right, from here on. You're now talking about integrated business planning with the ability to go horizontal, not just within your enterprise, not just bringing your different functions together, but bringing your partners into the whole same ecosystem. We work with a number of customers in recent times. I remember one recent conversation with actually a retailer in India, a retail chain in India, who have their own in-store brands. And they have a group of suppliers that they work in India, but they were looking to get those suppliers into one common technical and digital ecosystem where they can share demand on a more granular basis, at a more regional basis, for them to do better planning. And that's a whole different way on how you can collaborate. We're working with this manufacturer in the US who is an OEM manufacturer, and they try to see that, look, I have better visibility, demand sensing capability from my OEMs in what those equipment needs are going to be in the near term. And then to translate that to their suppliers, they build that ecosystem. So that's relatively easy to do. But they're now trying to create a bill of material breakdown to get to their suppliers, and to an N-2 collaboration environment, right? And that's fantastic use cases because you really need that digital ecosystem to be able to bring that whole collaboration journey together. And to our minds, like Gaurav was talking about, the maturity levels, if you are driving intelligent orchestration coming from this, and one of the CPG majors that we're working, the apparel and shoemaker majors that we're working with in the US, is now saying that, look, I have inventory visibility of my partner ecosystem on a near real-time basis. And as orders come in, if many of you are going to go online or B2B2C models, as orders come in, the ability to see that inventory near real time and orchestrate fulfillment of the order at a least cost to serve basis, sometimes requiring the splitting of the order to different suppliers and getting near real-time confirmations back and then doing track and trace with the 3PL manufacturer, 3PL provider, is kind of an end-to-end supply chain orchestration, which is kind of the most mature phase of this entire continuum, as we would call it. But the thing is that it all starts with a very base capability that is needed to get your partners connected on an ecosystem and your data in play before you can drive this kind of continuum. The good news is that you don't have to wait for significant tech investments and major change management, because bringing the ecosystem together through this integration and interoperable layer is relatively easier to do than you would think. And then you can build on more capabilities. So at TradeEdge, at EdgeVerve, this is where we're driving a global strategy of bringing this whole ecosystem together and helping the demand planners to do much more integrated business planning, not just within their enterprise, but to across their supply chain ecosystems. So that's the main thrust of what we wanted to communicate. And there's many other speakers lined up to speak, and hopefully we'll bring some of these thoughts together in the panel. Ajit, if I have a few minutes, if any questions.
Yes, you do have time. You finished well before time, so thank you, sir. We will open and we'll take for sure few questions. I will request participants, either they can put up the questions in the chat box, or please unmute yourself and ask question one by one. Yes, all to you participants, please shoot out your questions. Okay, so we do have a hand raise from Mr. Bhagya Neha. Neha Bhagya, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, sir. Neha this side from Nestle.
Hi, Neha.
Hi, I would like to ask you, sir, what are the steps or what are the drivers you think are important to improve your weekly demand plan? So what are the drivers we should consider to improve that, since we have to go more in depth? So the long-term forecasting monthly level is all fine, because in today's time, because the situation is so volatile, so the more and more focus is coming on the weekly planning. So what do you think are the important factors which we have to consider to improve the weekly planning?
So yeah, that's a great question. And at Nestle, I'm sure you have a basket of goods which have different many high number of SKUs, but also a basket of goods which has different capabilities and perishables and so on and so forth as well, right? So to our minds, your weekly forecasts have to be driven very closely from a granular sell-through, visibility of your sales and inventory availabilities thereof, right? That very granular view at a regional, district, market, store level at times will give you great abilities to forecast at a weekly level. And I'll give you an example. This is happening at COVID with one of our, global CPG customers. And during the COVID time in one of their international markets, which was really badly hit by COVID, obviously everyone lost sight of what's likely going to be the pickup of demand. But some of their SKUs were in the essential categories, and they saw huge spikes in demand. But the ability to see the demand at a kind of store SKU level and see the inventory availability, more importantly, led them to change their replenishment strategies at that very granular level. And over the next 4 weeks, as they were tracking down their out of stock situations, they had brought that delta down to less than a day in most of those critical areas in New York. So they were really tracking very well against the supply demand capabilities there because of that granular data visibility that they had at a store SKU level. So I think that's very extendable. When you look at weekly levels, that level of granularity of your ecosystem on the demand side would be a good input for you. Make sense, Neha?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Amit Pal, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Hi, Praveen. This is Amit from Shell. I wanted to ask a question. Yeah, hi. I wanted to ask you. You gave an example that you start from the retailers. If you know how your retailers are selling, and then that get forecasted downline the supply chain, and it can go even to your supplier ecosystem. But this is a black swan event, as the earlier speaker spoke, and we do not know the consumer patterns which are basically going on, even downstream of your retailer. It means your customers. So are there some examples where you basically forecast that the consumer pattern will go in such way, and then the downstream, the upstream get integrated with the eco space reorganization or something? And the other thing is, of course, there is no risk to the supply, but sometimes the prices spike because we in Shell are in a cyclical business where we are dependent upon so many commodities. How do you predict then the commodities in your upstream, which is your supply chain ecosystem? How do you predict the prices over there? So two questions in short.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Amit. So look, on the front end, as you start looking at data that is not just internal, or which is not just an extrapolation of what you've sold in the past, or any linear progressions thereof, your ability to get better sense of that demand is just increasing by the increasing manifold, right? So if I was to again look at your ecosystems, and try to extend from where Shell might be. Consumption of some of your goods on your retail storefronts or at your bunks and so on and so forth could give you better insights of where that likely changes and shifts are coming up because of events, right? So, and the other thing is about also external data in, it might be weather or ecosystem information, or just more granular information about individual markets and news feeds and so on and so forth, are about driving better visibility into that demand. So the broader that you can get on data inputs that you have that are more than just the internal data feeds, that broadens the horizon of how you're planning for. And we're trying to enable a lot of our clients to bring a lot of that external data together. For example, we're bringing in travel data, weather data, our 3PL data, many ecosystems that we're trying to bring together. On the supply side, Amit, I would say that, look, that's a tricky one. Look, from a price and commodity perspective. I think many organizations with this pandemic have realized that it's not enough just to have visibility about their immediate supplier or your priority suppliers. And organizations are trying to get down the path of saying, how can I get to N-1 and -2? Now, it's not easy because you've got to figure out a way of incentivizing those suppliers to give you that visibility, right? Because you feed off the visibility. Your plans and your risk mechanisms or de-risk mechanisms will depend upon that visibility. So there is technology that exists today to try and get your suppliers and suppliers at least connected. And you can try and do, goods tracing, bomb tracing, inventory visibility at that level, and then use forecasting capabilities or multi-attribute forecasting capabilities to try and predict event. We use things like graph databases, saying simulations of what happens if X goes down, what happens if Y percentage of price or commodity is not available. So that kind of granular tiered visibility could help you drive better commodity pricing changes that might impact your end prices and hence your demand on the front end. So those are some of the things that I can think of, Amit. But this makes for a great double-click detailed conversation. Would love to continue this beyond this event.
No, thank you, Praveen. That's a great answer. And I would also like to understand what technology really exists for this predictive things. Thank you so much, Praveen.
Yeah.
Let's connect later on.
Sure. Maybe, Ajit, one last question that I see. I was just looking at the chats as well. Is that I think Vijay had asked about integration of systems leads to dependence of systems on each other. Any way to optimize this dependence by avoiding impact to business in view of issue with any of the systems? Ajit, I'll take a minute and take this. Is that all right?
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Sure. So Vijay, great question. I think a couple of others believe that's important as well. So you're right. When you're trying to create a digital ecosystem and you're getting data from all of your parts, connected parties in the ecosystem, you're trying to assimilate that information, you're cleaning, cleansing, classifying. We use a lot of machine learning to connect the data, which is coming from disparate systems, disparate way that people drive that data, and connect it to your master data, right? So yes, there is a dependence on the system, but it's a much better alternate than where you might be today, which is that you have very limited information about that ecosystem at all, right? The other thing that we're doing in some of these technology platforms is that you should not have incomplete information because of that dependence. And so you have now technology that allows you to say, we have these ecosystems that say, okay, I have alerts that come out of the platform that says X retailer or Y supplier was supposed to send in their inventory information. It is not available. So somewhere there is an alert that goes out to your ecosystem that says, hey, incomplete information. And that will help you to take a view on whether you have the complete information to do your planning or your weekly or your daily planning exercise at all or not. Or at least somebody's working on correcting that information gap. We've also got alert mechanisms that says, you're sending me that you sold 1,000 units for the last 10 days, and suddenly your input comes up as 10,000 units. Hey, that's an anomaly. There's a statistical challenge probably there somewhere. So somebody needs to have an alert that goes to look at it saying, was this real or was there something off, or was there a promotion that was running at that time? So there are ways and means of doing it, but you can't really not have that dependence, but the ability to connect is what is giving you that digital view across your entire ecosystem. Hopefully that helps, Vijay. But I think, Ajit, look, we're probably out of time. Again, we could maybe continue with some of these on the panel. And I think my colleague Hormus, who's going to be moderating the panel, is also on the call. Hormus, hopefully you're keeping an eye out on these questions and take some of them forward.
Yes. So if not, then
Absolutely.
what we will do is, sir, I will forward these questions to you, Praveen, sir, so that you can even personally address these if somehow we miss them out.
Sure. Would love to. Thank you so much for the engagement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your time. Really appreciate. Okay.